The Giants continue to make moves to improve the roster. They bring in a couple of new players. They also retain a couple. And let's talk about one of the players that they are bringing back, and it's Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton will be back on a 2-year deal worth around $12 million. So, a $6 million per year. Obviously, there's incentives for that to become more, but pretty reasonable contract. And it's funny, Darius Slayton, this is someone that you just didn't see coming back. Even as good of a season as he had, this is a real big turnaround in terms of this is someone that, of course, was from the Dave Gettleman era, and honestly, one of the best draft picks that Gettleman had. Certainly, day 3 picks. We talk about Darius Slayton and Julian Love might be on the way out. It feels like that might happen, but still no word on his status. But Darius Slayton returns, and this is the first Giant. This is like the first late-ish round draft pick, day 3, if you will, draft pick that the Giants have re-signed since, I think, Ahmad Bradshaw. So it's not very common that you see it, at least with the Giants. And the way that Slayton got there is interesting because, look, he was buried on the depth chart to start the season. Inactive the first couple of games. And then they just absolutely needed him, and he performed. And Jones and Slayton have always had good chemistry. They came in together as rookies in 2019. And 2019 was Slayton's best season, but this past one, he was, a lot more dynamic. Look, is he a perfect player? No. Definitely not. I mean, you think about that drop he had in the playoffs against the Vikings, where if they somehow lost that game, plain and simple, Darius Slayton's not back as a New York Giant. Like, that's just kind of, it's not fair, but that would have been the case. But luckily, crisis averted. But Slayton, again, it's a 2-year deal. He's going to be in the mix. He is absolutely going to be in the wide receiver mix. And for Slayton, good for him to, because he took a pay cut as well. All signs were leading to Darius Slayton being on the way out, and he's back. And he seems well liked by his teammates, and I'm happy he's back. They could have went with a more splashy move, but there isn't that much out there. There is not that much out there. So this is a reasonable signing, and Darius Slayton really was one of the better wide receivers available. Staying with the wide receivers, the Giants bring in Parris Cambell. So Parris Cambell, it's a 1-year deal, around $6.7 million for the 1-year contract. And with Campbell, there's a lot of upside with Parris Cambell. And another theme here is that the Giants have been bringing a lot of Indianapolis Colts the last couple of years. You think about it, Mark Lewinsky, Bobby Okereke, and now Parris Cambell. Campbell was a late second-round pick out of Ohio State in 2019. And there's always been a lot of hope, but injuries have derailed him. But this year, he was finally healthy and put up a pretty good season on a pretty bad Colt team. Again, it's an aging Matt Ryan, Sam Ehlinger. There was even Nick Foles for a little bit against the Giants. And Campbell in that game had a long reception, kind of one of the few highlights the Colts had. But 63 catches, 623 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also had 5 rushes for 58 yards. So he seems like he could be someone that, definitely not a gadget player, but they could use him in different ways. And what the interesting thing will be is, will he be used mostly out of the slot or on the outside? He's versatile in that way. Like this past season, he was mainly out of the slot. 2021, in the limited time he had, was more on the outside. So I'm curious to see what happens with Parris Cambell, but hey, that's another wide receiver who's definitely going to factor in. And again, what I like about this is it's low risk, but this is someone that's got talent and a lot of speed. It seems like the Giants are trying to become a faster team. In the early developments of this offseason, it seems like they are making it a priority to become, a speedier team, which they were lacking. They definitely were. And so you look at the wide receiver room, and Parris Cambell could very well find himself in the mix for a lot of snaps. Someone who probably is off the roster, not that this is much of a surprise, but it could have gone either way, but you would think that Richie James will be going elsewhere. Furthering on the wide receiver front, and this is more special teams related, but the Giants bring in Jeff Smith. So the former New York Jet, he was undrafted and been on the Jets the last 4 seasons. He went to Boston College. And Jeff Smith, offensive production, not a whole lot to speak of. in his 4 years with the Jets. 34 catches, 426 yards, no touchdowns. He actually did get a touchdown versus the Giants in preseason. But for Smith, he's probably a special teams guy that maybe could be a depth. He's someone that, if you need him in a pinch, maybe he could be like a fifth receiver. Someone that, it's not like he's exclusively, but I think he's more of, I think the way I see it right now is he might be a gunner. I think that's what he was with the Jets. And so Smith, clearly someone that they were interested in, someone who, obviously was nearby with him being on the New York Jets. But now he's a Giant, so he stays locally. And we'll see what Smith brings to the table. So the wide receiver outlook right now, you would have to think that I still think that they're going to be interested in drafting wide receiver early in the draft. I still think that that's going to be something that you might see. But free agency, you have to think now that kind of comes to a close. So let's, think about the players that are in the current wide receiver room. Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Parris Cambell, Sterling Shepard, Colin Johnson, Jeff Smith. And so there's decent depth there. But of course, they are definitely lacking in like the guy. And look, you have Darren Waller. And so that helps. And I'm just glad that Joe Schoen didn't try to force anything. These are not forced moves where, look, like there are better receivers out there. Obviously, Odell Beckham comes to mind, and there are a few others, some that have already been signed, but it just wasn't worth it. This is a pretty weak wide receiver free agent class, if you will. So, excited to see what Parris Cambell can do, and happy to have Darius Slayton back. Now, the other move that was made is the Giants have re-signed Jihad Ward. Jihad Ward, who was with the Giants last season, who had been under Wink Martindale. He seemed like there was a lot of energy with Jihad Ward, and was always an interesting interview. Definitely a different sort of dude, but Ward good in the run game. Definitely not much of a pass rush threat. And I think the Giants are definitely still going to need to address that, right? Behind Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari, you definitely want to bring in someone that can rush the passer. Ward is different. Ward really, is good on early downs and, had a lot of nice tackles, a lot of tackles for loss as well. And so happy to have Ward back. A 1-year deal, right? So Ward 1-year deal, Campbell 1-year deal, Smith. I didn't see the contract details, but that's got to be a 1-year deal, and Slayton a 2-year deal. So these aren't like big commitments, but definitely notable for sure. And Ward, it makes sense. I mean, especially with Wink Martindale still as the Giants defensive coordinator, that Jihad Ward would return. I'm happy about that. So, hey, so far, no real complaints. I'd be nitpicking. I mean, look, have I agreed with every single move that's been made? No. But it seems like the Giants are on the right path. There's probably still some interesting things to be done. Like I said, Julian Love, I think that it came out that he's visiting the Seattle Seahawks. I think there's interest. But look, maybe there is still a fit there. But it, like, based on the way the beat reporters are talking about it, it feels like he's on the way out. And it's funny because if we spoke about this 2 weeks ago, I think it would have been thought, okay, Julian, not that like the two are mutually exclusive at all, but Julian Love back, Darius Slayton gone. And that didn't play out that way. So you just never know. And the one last thing, it's nice to see that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, I guess, are, I don't want to say admitting mistakes, but like there's an openness where, look, obviously they didn't pick up the fifth year option on Daniel Jones. Not that they didn't believe in him, and that was the prudent move at the time. But look, he performed and he was rewarded. Darius Slayton as well. Darius Slayton, like they wanted to trade him. They did not want Darius Slayton. They were playing David Sills over Slayton, and here it is, 2-year contract worth $12 million. Not bad. So it's nice to see that it's not like there's no stubbornness. And it seems like if you do well on the field, then look, that's going to open eyes, regardless of what regime you came from. It doesn't have to be. Now, look, and we don't even know this, but I guess an example of maybe where that isn't true is if, like, let's say you bring back John Feliciano and they let Nick Gates go. Maybe that's an example where the Feliciano was kind of their guy and Gates wasn't, but again, we don't even know if they want to bring Feliciano back. But like I said, for the most part, I just like the approach. And I think that they're fair to their players. They are. And so, happy about what's happening with this team. They're heading in the right direction. There probably will be some more moves to be done. I wouldn't think any big ones. I think that most of it is out of the way as we look forward to the draft, but we'll see, right? I mean, the Darren Waller trade came out of nowhere, and that's just how Joe Schoen is operating. But again, just wanted to touch upon some recent moves the Giants have made, notably Darius Slayton back, Jihad Ward back, and the Giants bring in from Indianapolis Parris Cambell, and from the Jets, Jeff Smith.